Welcome back to Right Side Broadcasting Network. Ashley Brasfield of the Daily Caller. Let's break down the State of the Union. Going to be a big one moments away.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. And I do think it is going to be a big one. The president is going to probably, my guess from Tariffs Friday announcement, I think it's going to be a very interesting situation. I don't think he will be remiss to confront the justices who will be sitting right in front of him at the State of the Union. That's my first prediction. I do think foreign policy will come up. I obviously, there's been a big presence and build up around, possible, interference with Iran and the war possibly starting there. I think he will possibly address that. We will see, though, as well as domestic policy, him addressing, things like affordability, pricing, and what the message will be going for the GOP into midterms and how he will be supporting that. And I think he's going to possibly even, make some comments regarding, GOP members getting some things passed. That's in, his outlet, I would say. It's things like the Save America Act. I would assume he's going to comment on with all those GOP Congress members sitting right in front of him. And, what the accomplishments really have been up until this point in the administration. I think that's something that he'll obviously go through and address in part of his speech. And my one prediction, though, the fun prediction, I think, is who will show up as guests to this event. And I know that they put out a feeler and an invite to the U.S. men's hockey team. So hopefully we'll get those guys at the State of the Union and the president giving them a big warm welcome home, possibly. So we'll see.
Jack Hughes with that golden shot, and Director Kash Patel letting it loose with the guys on Sunday, so that was fun to see. But on a serious note, Ashley, doing some amazing reporting with the Daily Caller. Why did Republicans skip the hearing for Epstein billionaire bestie Lex Wexner as this really amazing story continues to divulge and develop in the federal city?
Yeah, well, sounding like a broken record here, Epstein not going away, as we see here. And, this Lex Wexner, he was the main bankroller for Epstein. A lot of people that have, kind of dove into the Epstein story, it's caught a lot of national, international interest because of the ties with cultural individuals, political. It really just stems outward. But Les Wexner being that primary bankroller, founder of L Brands, which owns Victoria's Secret. That's how Wexner is mainly known. He's known and admitted to having a relationship with Epstein since the 80s and, kind of labeled Epstein as this mastermind of, being a con man in a way. So it was interesting to hear from Wexner, who nobody's questions and sat down. And Wexner himself has said that the DOJ and FBI has never had him sit down and question him about his ties to Epstein. So I think everyone was waiting anxiously for this testimony and deposition to take place. It actually, different than many others, happened in Ohio. They went to him. And what depositions are? They're legal proceedings. So it was a much, smaller area, a lot less members there. And it just happened to be that no GOP members showed up, and there was a lot more Democrats there. The depositions are done by staffers, lawyers, where questions are asked. The majority gets the first hour, and then after that, the minority, being the Democrats, get the second hour, and it switches back and forth. This deposition lasted almost 6 hours with Wexner, many questions asked across the board. But the question remains, where was the GOP members and why didn't they travel there? And I think I reached out to House Oversight GOP spokeswoman. They told me that, the House is currently in recess because this is the House Oversight Committee. They're at their districts talking to constituents. So I do think there is an argument to be said there. But at the same time, I think Americans have been looking forward to getting questions asked by this guy who's been the main bankroller for Epstein. And his name's been tossed around. He's in the files. He's been named as a co-conspirator. And I do think it was a question as to why they didn't show up. I know even though they're at an important time with recess happening. And then many Democrats individually didn't show up to the Clinton deposition that they didn't show up to now. Now they're scheduled for this week. And where is it? New York. So they will be traveling. Many members will be traveling to New York later this week. And I guess there is posing the question as to why members are having to travel to these individuals. And even Wexner's lawyer came out on X stating that, they agreed to this. So they put the location where the deposition would be. It was in Ohio. So the GOP members agreed to this. Leadership agreed to this. And I think there's a question as to why there is special treatment for people like the Clintons and Wexner, why they don't have to, be walked into Washington, D.C. like a regular American would. So I think there's an argument there that, you can spend time with your constituents where you need to, but also, this is a very important issue to many constituents themselves. And so where should members be spending their time? Should they have allotted, a certain amount of GOP members to go to this or, be placed there? I think that's the question. And I think it caught a lot of people's eye, especially on Thursday and Friday of last week after the deposition.
I believe the members of the Trump family also had to travel to the nation's capital during the lawfare saga of Russia. In turn, with everything else, with the lawfare and Eric Trump, who is probably the most investigated human being and subpoenaed human being in human history. But we see, Ashley, as well, that New Mexico and their state legislature, because of that ranch that Jeffrey Epstein owned, along with Ghislaine Maxwell attending on many different occasions, are now looking at this from a state level. Can you look into that investigation and tell us some developments there?
Yeah, so this is one of the areas, Epstein had 3 estates. It was the Virgin Islands island, the well-known Epstein Island that everybody calls it. He had his New York townhome, as well as Zorro Ranch, which is located in New Mexico near Santa Fe. And basically, lawmakers, they had a closed criminal case take place in 2019. They closed it. They found no evidence of anything. But there's been speculation of what happened at that ranch when Epstein owned it, and with Ghislaine Maxwell and the sexual misconduct that from alleged victims like Annie Farmer that said that they were traveled out there, and that's where much of the misconduct took place. And so I think there is a looming question due to the idea that it's in a rural area of what was happening there. And the case in 2019 was closed. Now the state legislature has opened up a new subcommittee to look into this more, and they are using some of the funds that were paid out during that time period in 2019. I think about 2.9 million, I want to say, is around that number. I might have that wrong. It's in the piece, though. So feel free to go look there. But I think that there's also been a development in the last few days that I received a statement from the New Mexico Department of Justice stating that they will be reopening a criminal investigation as well into the Zorro Ranch there due to the nature of the documents that have been released by the DOJ. They have also sent a letter to federal authorities at the DOJ in Washington, D.C., asking for help in the investigation and some other things like that. So I put that statement out on X. Anyone can go take a look at that. But I think New Mexico is one of those areas, and Zorro Ranch itself, due to the fact there was not a lot of eyes there in comparison to places like the Virgin Islands and New York City and the access. I think people have a lot of questions about that, property that he owned, who he bought it from, who was invited there. Multiple individuals said they visited the ranch. So I think it's one of those areas of the wider Epstein scheme that needs to be looked at. And, that was a domestic property within the United States that he owned. So I think it's going to be very interesting keeping an eye on developments there.
Well, thank you for staying so closely on this, as I'm sure, as you mentioned, we'll be talking a lot about this throughout the year. Now, one of the more bizarre stories, and again, happy that you do the journalism. That's the big criticism of right, left, and center, and those so-called mainstream outlets, that they ignore some of these stories. Congressman Tony Gonzalez's office, a very sad story, an alleged affair with him and a staffer, which I believe is against House rules, if not all congressional rules, when it comes to intimate relationships with staffers. In addition to that, though, the situation where she set herself on fire and committed suicide, just absolutely terrible. Can you tell us about this story?
Yes, well, this happened. Regina Santos Aviles was the one that set herself afire. She was a regional director for Tony Gonzalez, and down in Texas. He's out of, I believe, the San Antonio area. Her home was in Uvalde, Texas, though. So this is where her death took place. And there was I guess, circulation and going on in Texas for months about a alleged affair. So the Daily Caller, we dug into this a little further. We were asking for coroner reports as well, talking to the local police department of any foul play, which there seems to have been ruled there is none. But, really tragic death. It caught a lot of eyes, and the rumor mill started, as it does, down in Texas, and it made its way up to D.C. So we've been sticking on this for months, but now an outlet out of San Antonio, they broke text messages that were sent between Santos Alvias, and so they basically stating that the staffer and him were having an affair. She admitting that to the other staffer. He has currently left the office now and working in other campaigns. But the Daily Caller, had other sources stating the exact same thing, that there was an affair going on. We've stuck on this. And I think it's a really tragic scenario. It also has been reported that Gonzalez has been under a House ethics complaint and investigation for over a year now. We were also reaching out for House ethics for months, trying to figure out if that was true. And so Gonzalez is in a heated primary currently. And so we've been doing polling if the public knew about the, alleged affair going on. And polling has shown since November that people have begun to notice it, which way they would vote in the GOP primary in that district. So it will be in a very interesting race. It seems that the NRCC has continued to put support behind Gonzalez in this race, and as well as the president has endorsed Gonzalez, which there's been calls for him to unendorse him. So it's a developing story, and we'll continue to see what happens. But it seems that the text messages have resurfaced between the two.
Ashley Brasfield, reporter for the Daily Caller. Where can we find all of your good work?
I am on X at Brasfield Ashley. I'm on Instagram at Ashley E. Brasfield. And you can find my work with pieces on the Daily Caller's social media accounts, as well as our website on my profile.
And we'll continue to follow and watch and have you on the right side of history. Ashley Brasfield, thank you for joining us for our continued coverage of State of the Union 2026. And we'll see you again soon on the right side of history.
Thank you for having me.